this is my review of Sonic X. Okay, so this episode wound up turning out exactly as I predicted. So, well, for the most part. But this episode does kind of confirm what he said last episode about how Sonic was able to just kind of convince Chris to just kind of let him go home, and Chris finally comes to terms with the fact that Sonic needs to leave in this episode. So the episode starts off with how it ended, with everybody saying goodbye to the Mobians as they go back to their home planet. But as Sonic is about ready to leave, Chris goes to say goodbye, and we actually hear his internal dialogue here, and we find out that he actually, we already knew this, but he doesn't want Sonic to leave, and is kind of questioning about whether or not he should let Sonic go home, and that's when he eventually pushes the button to shut the machine off. And then once the machine is off, he grabs Sonic by the hand and hauls ass into the woods. And Sonic isn't entirely sure what's going on at first. He isn't entirely sure where they're going or why Chris decided to keep him stuck there and is dragging him off. But upon realizing that Chris clearly needs his support, he then decides to start leading the way, and they continue to go outward and continue to keep running. So, at which point Chuck begins to panic a little bit, pointing out that they obviously need to bring Sonic back, or the time suspension phenomenon is going to kick in, and obviously if they don't, they're not going to have enough time to actually bring him back if they're not careful. So if they don't find him soon, there's going to be a lot of problems. At which point, Mr. Tanaka and Topaz actually come out of the woods and reveal that they actually went looking for Chris, and they couldn't find him. So, and Topaz points out that they'll probably need like military or police action to actually go and find him and corner him off. But they realize that, but Chuck realizes that they probably won't be able to find him that way. And just reiterates his point that if they don't find him soon, they could cause problems. At which point, Sonic and Chris are walking through Station Square and are wondering where they're actually supposed to go. At which point they spy a bike, and Chris decides to take it, and it's fine because as it turns out, the bike was actually donated and left in town for people who actually need it. So it's revealed in this little side cutaway thing, but it is revealed that some kid's dad just left it in the middle of town, hoping that somebody would actually use it. And he was right, because Chris and Sonic wound up using it. And as they're pedaling, Chris wonders where they should actually go, and Sonic tells Chris that he'll go wherever Chris decides they should go. So Chris continues to keep pedaling. At which point, Chris wonders where they should go, since they can't go home because of what happened. But he does continue to keep pedaling and keep going forward, and wonders how Sonic can actually be keeping so calm, and is wondering why Sonic is so calm about the whole situation and how he doesn't seem to be worried. At which point they stop at a diner and continue to eat. And Chris once again asks Sonic where they should continue going, and if Sonic would be happy going wherever Chris wants to go. And Sonic just reconfirms that he's been everywhere. He usually runs everywhere, so he'd be more than happy to actually go with Chris and go wherever he wants to go, and just let Chris take charge on their little journey. But as they're finishing up their food, they actually see a news bulletin about how Chris is missing and is quote unquote kidnapped Sonic. And then his parents release a heartfelt plea on the news to actually make sure Chris actually comes home safe and sound. At which point Chris and Sonic realize they need to leave and get back on their bike, but quickly realize that that's not going to work since Nelson has sent his entire personal Air Force out to actually go and find Chris. At which point Chris realizes that they're not going to be able to outrun the helicopters, and when Sonic asks him if he's willing to give up and go home now, Chris tells him that there's no chance of that happening. So Sonic hails a truck driver and asks them to give him a lift to the woods where they're trying to go, and he does exactly that. At which point, and they do abandon their bike in the meantime. So they continue, but they do continue onward. And at which point, Nelson and Lindsay are completely confused as to what they can actually do to actually find Chris. And then proceed to start thinking of various ways they can actually bribe Chris into coming back home. But eventually, Chuck himself actually intervenes and tells Nelson to put the phone down. At which point he explains that at which point he tries to explain to them that they don't deserve to have their son back if they can't figure out why he left in the first place. At which point he explains that Chris and we've already kind of established this, but Chris kind of grew up in the house by himself, and his parents got way too busy for him. So obviously he's feeling like the only person that he doesn't want to go back to the way things were, where he was all by himself. And obviously he took Sonic because Sonic was the first friend who actually spent a great deal of time with him and actually wanted to be around him and actually spend time with him. Because his parents sure as hell weren't. So they realize now that they've actually realized they've kind of been neglecting their son. And Chuck tells them that he most likely wants to be found and would actually be in a location where he would actually want to be found. So they rack their brains to think of places where Chris might actually have gone, and they eventually do think of a place, and we do find out where that is in a couple of minutes. But in any case, after getting out of the cab, they actually do start taking Chris and Sonic do start continue going forward and continue to hike. And as they're continuing to hike through the woods, Chris asks Sonic if he remembers where all the different places he's been, and Sonic kind of points out that he doesn't really. He just kind of goes from one place to the next. He kind of goes in a bit of a blur, and he just kind of sort of remembers places where he's been and sort of not. At which point Chris begins to wonder if Sonic will actually forget about him, and Sonic points out that that's absolutely not the case, and then jokingly remarks that he could never forget somebody who got him into so much trouble, and Chris just laughs along with him. At which point they continue to think about where they should go. And eventually Chris does decide to keep going, and they keep hiking through the woods. But it's shown throughout this sequence that it's shown that Chris is struggling with with walking over all of the fallen logs and stuff that they're trying to hike through, while Sonic is having no problem. And eventually Chris just stops accepting Sonic's help. And he keeps working on trying to improve himself rather than relying on Sonic. Which Sonic seems a little bit confused about, but they do eventually wind up in a place Sonic hasn't been before. As it turns out, Chris actually was making his way toward their old summer villa where he used to come with his family all the time. But eventually, his mom and dad got too busy and stopped taking him. So it's explained that this is where he was actually going, and that's where he was actually taking Sonic. At which point they proceed to sit down and create a fire, but Chris actually trips on a rock while trying to handle way too much firewood, and Sonic catches him, but Chris just kind of takes the firewood from him and says that he can do it himself. At which point he starts to wonder if Sonic is actually mad at him, pointing out that he did kind of stop Sonic from actually going back to his home world. At which point, after they get the fire going, Chris actually decides to ask Sonic, pointing out if Sonic would actually be happy there if he wants to go home or not. And Sonic merely points out that he would be more than happy doing whatever. At which point Chris asks him if he actually would want to return home, and wonders if it would actually be better for him and if he was actually mad. But Sonic admits that he isn't really all that mad, and points out that it's ultimately Chris's choice as to whether or not he goes home. Then proceeds to explain that that since Chris actually saved him from the pool, that he has kind of indebted to him a little bit. At which point Chris completely misunderstands what Sonic meant and believes that Sonic is only pretending to be his friend because Chris saved him from a pool. But Sonic reiterates that that's actually not the case, and that he is very much Chris's friend. And then points out that the reason he says that it's Chris's choice is that Sonic doesn't really care either way. So to point out, to use Sonic's own words, as long as he's got somewhere to run, he'll be happy. He doesn't really mind being either it doesn't really matter to him. Either he's on Mobius or he's on Earth. It doesn't really matter which, because either way he can run wherever he wants to go. So it doesn't really matter to him either way. But the reason Sonic points out why it's Chris's choice is because obviously Chris is going to need him. Obviously he feels like if Chris is going to need him, then he'll stay. But if not, then then he's more than happy to go home. At which point, Chris does finally make his decision. He finally realizes how selfish he's actually been. He realizes that he would be more than happy to have Sonic there, and they can continue going on adventures even if time did come to a stop. But he does realize he can't keep Sonic there indefinitely because that wouldn't be fair to Sonic. He does realize that he's been selfish and that he's been trying to keep Sonic there because he wasn't ready to say goodbye, but he now realizes that Sonic does need to go home, and by spending so much time with Sonic throughout this episode, he realizes that he's ready to see Sonic go home, and realizes that he doesn't really need him there because he, as he re-explains, he didn't really have any friends, and his parents growing up, and his parents kind of got too busy for him, so he's always been alone and was waiting for a friend like Sonic to come along and kind of help him out of his funk. So he does point out that Sonic does need to go home, and finally relents that's probably time Sonic went back to his own planet. While Sonic agrees that that's probably the best thing, he does point out something interesting. That he feels like maybe, and this is just a hypothetical on Sonic's part, but he points out that maybe Mobius and Earth were meant to join back together, since obviously it feels if they were Sonic being in his world, in Chris's world, actually kickstarted that a little bit. It does point out that they are very similar, in hopes that maybe one day they will actually join each other, and points out that this doesn't necessarily have to be goodbye. They will eventually see each other again. But does also point out that until then they can actually look at the moon and think of each other until that day happens. Pointing out that they're very similar and all odds that they'll actually be able to remember each other by knowing that they actually share a night sky. At which point Nelson and Lindsay are actually running through the woods, pointing out that their summer villa is the only place they could think to go. Pointing out that they used to be so happy when they went there, but obviously they haven't been there in a while. But point out that if there's any place where Chris would actually want to go, it would be there. And as it turns out, and as we know, they are right, because when they get there, Chris is still very much there and is kind of watching the water for a little bit. And they do call out to him, and he turns around and smiles. So. Yeah, this episode ends on a bit of a positive note. So Sonic is going to go back home in the next episode. He's finally going to go back home to Mobius, and the adventure is going to quote unquote end. There's obviously there is a third season, and I will be covering that, but this is where the original series does end, with Sonic going back to his home planet, and going back and kind of just continuing onward with his adventures as usual. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that's actually going to be set up next episode. But yeah, this episode shows that Chris is finally ready to let Sonic go home. After spending a full day and going on a run with Sonic, it's time. He's finally ready to see Sonic off. He's finally ready to let Sonic go home, and now he knows he's not going to be alone because his parents actually actively went out of their way to go and find Chris at their old villa and bring him home. Personally, instead of just sending shoppers, bribing him with toys, all the things they normally do to try and show that they love him. They made a personal effort to go out and find him. So Chris probably isn't going to feel so alone anymore now that when Sonic's gone. So yeah, that's how this episode ends. And it did kind of work out exactly as I predicted, with Sonic just kind of helping Chris work through all of his angst about the fact that Sonic needs to leave, and now Chris is in a comfortable point where he's actually happy to see Sonic off, and is actually willing to let Sonic go home, even though he knows he'll probably maybe hypothetically see him again. It's unclear if that'll actually happen, but in any case, yeah, that's how this episode ends. So that's my review of Sonic X. What did you guys think? Let's get discussing in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on the channel, then I recommend checking that out. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. If you want to help support me, that is the best way to do that. So be sure to go check that out. And also, finally, if you want to see more content from me, then there are two ways you can do that. One is by checking out my Twitch down in the description below. I stream every Sunday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, so if you guys want to go see that, by all means, go ahead. Link is down in the description. Again, every Sunday, 2:30. And the other way you can actually help support me and watch more content from me is by checking out the links in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So, if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But, regardless of whether or not you do any or all those things, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!